Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Growing Up in Scientology. I am talking today with Geir Isene. Hi, Geir.
Hello.
By the way, am I pronouncing your name correctly?
You will never be able to. You're American. You'll butcher my name no matter what. So it's actually only two countries in the world where you have this name Geir, and it means old. In Old Norse, it means a spear, and that is in Iceland and in Norway. So you have to actually be of one of those two languages to be able to pronounce it correctly. The correct pronunciation is Geir Isene.
Okay. Am I at least pronouncing it the way you would expect an American to pronounce it?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, cool. All right, so for everybody watching, the reason I wanted to chat with Geir today is, and by the way, I'm amazed that you and I have not ever spoken before today. I've been aware of you for a very long time. Is that in the world of former Scientologists, Geir, I don't know if you've noticed this, but there tends to be a lot of bickering and fighting over people feeling that there is one proper way to reflect back on one's time in Scientology or to describe one's time in Scientology. And there's only, and I'm not speaking for everyone, I'm saying there tends to be this idea that there's one way to process it or to reflect back on it. And if you don't process it that way or reflect back on it that way, there's something wrong with you. And I don't see it that way. I see it that everyone who has spent a lot of time in Scientology and is now out is perfectly free to reflect back on and process their experience in whatever way is true to them. And there is no right way or wrong way. And what I'd like to do is have conversations with people who look back on their experience in many different ways to sort of have an opportunity to discuss it on how they view their time in Scientology, why they view it that way, and to kind of show there's not a right or a wrong way to look back on it. And I think it's more productive for people to understand why people view their time in Scientology the way they do, as opposed to trying to fit it into some box of if you don't view it this way, then you're viewing it the wrong way. And you in particular, and just for a little bit of context, are you currently an independent Scientologist?
I'm not. I'm not currently independent or dependent anything.
But aside from maybe someone not liking to put a label on something, do you currently get any Scientology auditing?
No, I do not. I don't. I don't basically involve myself in Scientology at all. I use some of the techniques from Scientology in various coaching I do, and in helping world-class athletes and artists and executives when I do my coaching or mental training. But I don't do Scientology myself.
Okay. Um, and okay, perfect. And yet you have a blog, which I only became aware of this week, which is, I think if I were to put myself in someone else's shoes, I would look at your blog and say, this is remarkably positive towards Scientology. I don't know if you would characterize it that way, but I can understand why many would characterize it that way. And because when you were in Scientology, you did make it all the way up through OT8, the highest someone can go in Scientology. And because you now no longer consider yourself a Scientologist in any way and don't get auditing, and I thought it would be an interesting conversation for me to be able to ask you why you still view certain things about your involvement in Scientology in a remarkably positive manner. Do you feel like I'm characterizing it correctly? Do you view your time in Scientology and many of the things you did in a relatively positive light?
Yeah, everything I did in Scientology, from my personal point of view, every grade, every service I did, I had positive gain from. And some of those gains have been short-lived, some of those gains have been, long-lived, and some have seemed to be permanent, at least since I left Scientology in 2009, which is now 9 years ago. So everything I did had a positive gain for me. That doesn't mean that I didn't see shit in Scientology or people treated badly or the cultish aspect or kind of, you know, all the stuff that people talk about in negative manner regarding Scientology. I've seen plenty of that. But that in itself does not invalidate the fact that I actually got positive gains from everything I did in Scientology, from the communication course and everything up through OT8. That's a fact.
Right. Makes sense. So I'm going to jump right in with just what, for me, what is the most obvious kind of devil's advocate question here. If everything you did in Scientology, and everything is a big word, but whatever, was positive for you, or everything at least had some aspect of positive gain for you, then why leave?
And get the last part. The question.
Oh, okay. Okay, if everything you did in Scientology, you found an aspect of improvement or something positive in it, then why leave Scientology in the first place? And why not still do it today?
That's actually easy to answer, because I feel I graduated from Scientology. There's nothing more for me to get there, and that's on a personal level, right? And on the rest of the stuff regarding other people and what one does for other people, then I can see Scientology doing great harm. I mean, to the world and to the society at large. I can see actually a lot of stuff happening which is detrimental. Now, but on a personal level, what I got out from Scientology, I'm happy with. I can see to offer for me personally to improve myself in Scientology. And that is easy to see when you've gone through whole bridge up through OT8, and you get to the point, or at least I did, I get to the point where I see, there is something wrong about the basics of Scientology that will limit a person to go beyond a certain level, or certain awareness level, or certain epiphanies. And that is the fact that Scientology as a whole is a system that sees itself as both complete and consistent. Now, studying Kurt Gödel, a brilliant mathematician, you will know that there is no such system that can be both consistent and complete. Completeness, or there is inconsistencies, or both in Scientology. And what I've come to see is that there is both. There is inconsistencies and there is incompletion. The bridge is not complete. You get to OT8, and there is shit that will, you know, hit the fan still. And it boils down to this: Scientology complex. I got a lot out of it, but I think there is a much simpler and better way to put everything together and give me the same gains if we were to start over. It's a complex, huge system that doesn't need to be that way at all. So I'm actually striving for more simplicity, getting simpler, becoming simpler, doing simpler all the time. And that is a better and more gainful way for me these days than continuing into this complexity called Scientology.
Okay.
Hope that sort of
so
answers.
well, sure, because I think some would hear the statement that you did benefit from Scientology, that you felt like you benefited from almost every step of Scientology. And some would hear that and mean, well, if that is true, then therefore you must be in favor of encouraging others to do Scientology. Are you in favor of others doing Scientology?
I'm in favor of people doing whatever they think is right for them. I mean, I've gotten gains from a lot of other things. I've gotten huge gains from me studying at the university. I've gotten huge gains from doing amateur astronomy. I've gotten huge gains from collecting old HP calculators and programming the shit out of them. I do get gains from almost everything I do in life. So Scientology is not a single thing I get gains from. It's everything in life. And sometimes it would be beneficial for a person maybe to do parts of Scientology, something else, take a swim, go for a hike, climb Mount Everest. I don't know. And every person to his own. Every person should figure out what the thing that benefits him or her would be, and then just do that. I'm actually recommending for one person to do some type of auditing just because he has a problem that seems to fit that context. For other people, I would recommend doing something else. I mean, lose weight or whatever it is.
Yep. I understand where you're coming from there. Okay, so now you said that the reason for you for leaving Scientology was that in essence you graduated from it. You sort of felt like you'd taken away from it everything you were going to be able to take away from it. But is that actually what got you to leave? I mean, did you wake up one day and say, I've milked everything from this that I can, and therefore I'm moving on? Or did some specific
No,
set of circumstances lead to you leaving?
I've wrote about that. The actually tipping point, the thing that made me leave, is actually it's described like this: during my 25 years in Scientology, I got gains from everything, but I also saw a lot of shit, right? But if you take the gains and subtract the shit I saw, people being treated badly, all that kind of stuff, I would still get positive result. It would still be a plus. So my explanation or rationalization to myself of why I saw the shit I saw was like this. I had this idea that there must be some kind of a Dalai Lama or enlightened being on top of the Church of Scientology, and he is only struggling with his minions that cannot really behave like people. So I'm thinking, he must have a really hard time trying to, whip people into shape or enlighten them into shape, because the stuff I see in Oslo and Hamburg and Copenhagen, etc., some of it is so freaking out that it couldn't be that he would condone that. And that was my rationalization up until the point where I actually met David Miscavige and had a photo session with him. And I've actually talked about this in a lot of lectures I had on Scientology. I also written about it in my book, and also written about it on my blog, the moment I met David Miscavige. And that was a completely freakish, insane situation. And what I got out from that, meeting this psychopath of a person, was that, oh my God, my rationalization is completely upside down. It's not a matter of the minions being unable to behave correctly while this enlightened being is trying to straighten them up. It's the other way around. It's a trickle-down effect. The insanity comes from the top. And I have seen this insanity close up. He said, you should be the next ED of Oslo Org, executive director, the person that should be in charge of Church of Scientology in Norway. And I said, no, sir, I'm not. And from there on, it became just, it went downhill from there. And he was so rattled and so shaken by the fact that he couldn't recruit me on the spot that he just, in the middle of a sentence, just turned around and walked out the room and stayed out for 5 minutes. And the people in the room, his adjutants and his minions and his, fawning people around him, they were like scuttering around. Oh my God, he said no, to the emperor, sort of thing. And I was thinking, what is this? This must be like a hidden camera show on some kind of. So this was the situation. And I thought, my rationalization doesn't work anymore. This shit will only get worse. So it's time for me to leave, because my justification is blown. So that was when I actually started. But at the same time, just 2 weeks before, I had completed OT8. So it's sort of a coincidence of two things. One is philosophical. I graduated. I completed the whole age. And then I met this idiot 2 weeks later. My whole justification fall apart. And I said, I can't be part of this organization. If there is nobody at the top trying to handle the shit I see, the shit will only get worse. And be part of that. I need to leave.
Got it.
So that's the whole explanation.
So it really was a coincidence of these two things. What do you think would have happened if you had not met David Miscavige and you did not realize that the whole construct, as you had been looking at, was actually the complete opposite? Is it possible that you would have just carried, let's say you'd never met David Miscavige after finishing OT8. Yeah. Is it possible you would have just remained in Scientology, being able to explain away the shit that you saw the same way you had been explaining it away?
Probably not, because just was 2006. I actually left in 2009. So that prompted me, or a little bit later, it prompted me to start looking out on the internet to see what is out there. And then I started reading all these stories about David Miscavige hitting people, the truth rundown that came out, and there was this huge blow up in media, and I was intrigued by that. So I spent, 1,000, 1,500, I don't know how many hours reading everything I could find on Scientology on the net. And that coincided with my own experience with David Miscavige. So it just confirmed. Had I not met David Miscavige, I would still have read all those things due to the fact that the truth rundown came out. And at the time, I was also working for OSA. So I had this carte blanche authority to go out on the internet and read everything without a problem, which I did based on that. So I would come to the same conclusion, only it would not confirm my personal experience with David Miscavige. I would still reach the same conclusion. I would still leave Scientology. That's my belief.
Interesting. Interesting. So one thing that I hear, one kind of comment that I've seen on social media in response to people that point a finger at David Miscavige as far as being the source of the current abuses in Scientology, is that if you point the finger at David Miscavige, you must secretly be pro LRH because you think LRH is a great guy and Miscavige is the source of the problems. I think that is a lazy interpretation of criticisms against Miscavige. But let me ask you, do you feel that LRH was a great guy who created a great thing and Miscavige is the source of the bad, evil Church of Scientology that we see?
No, not at all. I think David Miscavige is a product of his upbringing in Scientology, and that was created by LRH. I think LRH was a black and light-ish person. And I think he was an expert in taking what other people have researched and packaging it together in a way that was sellable to a lot of people. And a lot of good-meaning people that did their best to do counseling for other people and make them have gains, which was the thing with me. So I think he was a marketing person and a salesperson and a packaging person first and foremost. I don't see him as any, brilliant genius good guy or something like that. I think he had major black spots. I think he was a troubled being. I think he had major issues when he grew older and started fighting with his body thetans and whatnot. I think that was a huge, I think him himself was a huge problem that was, partly created by fame. He got famous, he wrote a book, he got famous, and all this fame got to him where he became this cult leader, just like many others have been. So I'm not painting LRH in any way, shape, or form just white. No.
That's really interesting. So, by the way, do you mind if we have some conversation about the OT levels? Is that talking about body thing? Okay.
No, I've delineated the whole of the OT levels in my book. I've written every content of every level in my book from OT1 all through OT8. Yeah.
Okay. So, so let me take it a step backwards. Do you, so you just made a comment that Hubbard was really good at taking research others had done and kind of packaging it in a nice way that could be easily sold to people who in their own right might then turn around and genuinely help people with this information. I happen to see it the same way that you do there. But do you believe in the basics of Scientology as being accurate? And I realize even accurate is probably a lazy word, but the concept of Thetan, the concept of the reactive mind, and let's say the concept of body Thetans, because I know even though you don't learn that until the OT levels, when you take the entire subject as a whole, it is still one of the core tenets of Scientology. You have your reactive mind, you have your body, you are a Thetan, and therefore there are also these body Thetans. Is that something you still believe is a correct view of existence, of reality?
I have to decompose that. I do believe we are spiritual beings. I think there is the universe, the physical universe cannot be both complete and consistent itself based on Gödel's incompleteness theorems. So the physical universe cannot be, as we know it, complete. It cannot be everything there is, because there is every evidence that what we see is consistent in this physical universe. So since every law seems to be consistent, it cannot be complete. So there must be something outside the realms of physical universe to complete the physical universe itself. Therefore, I believe that we're spiritual beings. Now, I've delineated that in my one-page book called Free Will. I write one-page book these days because if you can't say it on one page, you shouldn't say it. So, and also I hate putting people through 300 pages of anecdotes and whatnot. So all the blah blah stripped on one page. So one-page book on free will. You should read that, and you should get the point where I say all of these things which I'm telling you now. Now, then what about the reactive mind? No, I don't believe there is a reactive mind. No, I don't believe in clear. I think people become gradually more aware to the point where they have a big epiphany. Oh, I'm even more aware now. And you might call that clear. You might call it something else. You might call it Bodhi. You might call it, I don't care. But there is levels of awareness that people go through. And there are individual awareness steps that people go through. And sometimes they break through some barrier. Fine. I don't believe in body thetans. I think that's a lie. And the basic things and why I believe that is a lie is written quite extensively on my blog. And that is, if that was the case, just the fact that there should be then 300 million body thetans out there that is freed and should be returnees coming back into the org saying, oh, I'm partly cleared, I'm fully cleared, etc. Because there is this bulletin called BT's clearing on OT6-7, where you actually go through and clear, quote unquote, a body thetan. Those would be clears and OTs that would then obviously return and show up in the Church of Scientology, and LRH instruct the auditors take that specific procedure and complete it on these returnees, etc. Now that doesn't happen. There are no routine returnees. So from just the statistical fact, it is obviously a lie. And there are many other reasons why it's a lie. I believe that what we handle on the OT levels is parts of yourself that you have decided not to take responsibility for. It's similar to a truck driver running over a 4-year-old girl, deciding I'm not going to be a truck driver anymore. I killed someone. I'm not going to put myself in a position where I'm behind a wheel driving a truck anymore. That's not me. So the person shies away from the responsibility, saying that's no longer me. Now, that can be compartmentalized in the person's mind to say that's another person that drove that truck. It wasn't really me. It was sort of another person. And that when that becomes cemented, it becomes sort of schizophrenic a little bit, where parts of the person is no longer himself. Now, to take responsibility for that, you come up to the conclusion, oh, that's actually me. That's me too. And that idiot that raped the girl, that's me too. And all these things that you have done through, I don't know how many million years, but all the stuff, the shit that you do, this lifetime, whatever, is stuff that you then start to take responsibility for, and it becomes you. Which coincidentally is the same as the procedure on OT5 and 6 and 7, where the end result is that thing, or actually you coming to the conclusion that it's me. The final answer to the procedure, who are you, is supposed to be me. And LRH thinks, oh, that's the body thetan saying I'm me. No, it's actually you coming to the conclusion that, oh, that part that I shied away from responsibility from is actually me. That's my belief. That's how I see it. So this introspection that people do is bound to have some kind of beneficial. If you're interested in being benefited from it, you should have some beneficial gains from looking into your own lack of responsibility and coming to the conclusion that, oh, I'm getting more whole here. I'm taking responsibility for my shit here.
Got it. So I'm hearing some feedback. All right. I wasn't hearing feedback before. Did anything change?
No, not really.
Okay. All right, I'm just going to talk through it. So now it seems to me, correct me if I'm getting this wrong, that the way you just described your interpretation of what you're doing on the OT levels, that's something you're able to say by looking back on it and kind of reevaluating and reprocessing what L. Ron Hubbard says you are doing when you're doing the OT levels. when you were actually doing the OT levels, is the description that you just gave how you felt about what you were doing? Or at that time, did you think you were doing what Hubbard said you were supposed to be doing?
I would say up to OT7 somewhere, I was believing that what I did was what LRH told me I did. On OT3, I wasn't really, I didn't care. I just did the procedure and see what happens. But then during 3 and on 4 and 5 and into parts of 7, I was believing that. And then on 7, I started to have some doubts, but they didn't really surface because it was sort of illegal to let them surface. If that came up in a session, it would be, you know, all hell would break loose. But I had some tingling doubts. So what am I really doing here? Now, but I did complete. The whole thing, and I didn't find any more areas where it would show up as a quote unquote body thetan. So there was nothing more. So I completed OT7. I went on to OT8. OT8 was really, really strange. That was a whole different level of wow-ish thing, because lots of stuff happened that I couldn't explain. Stuff that, you know, it's just strange stuff. So, and it was short. It was just 2 weeks. So I'm still trying to sort of figure out what the hell happened on OT8. But I write a little bit about that on my blog as well. My doubts and hesitations or whatnot on OT8.
Right. So, okay. When it comes to the parts of the Scientology bridge below clear, and this is coming from someone who myself never did any new era Dianetics auditing, did very minimal grades processes auditing, never did I even do objectives. Because I started so young and didn't have a drug history and my OCA test was above the center line, I never had to do a drug handling. So I never did the drug rundown. I never did objectives. I didn't do the Purif until I was like 21. I have always been able to very easily compare the grades processes and life repair auditing with any other form of talk therapy, with the caveat that I've never engaged in any other form of talk therapy. But I've always said that because that lower level of auditing had to do with things that everyone in life struggles with to one degree or another. Memory, communication problems, transgressions, change, and fixed conditions. That it doesn't matter whether Hubbard was right or wrong about thetan, mind, body, engrams. It doesn't matter. The fact that you were sitting somebody down in a chair and asking them questions that would get them to introspect and examine their life and give you an answer, that it's okay to say, that can be helpful, because it doesn't, because such a statement is not dependent on the truth of what Hubbard said. I mean, you could go to the bar over some drinks and talk with somebody about these subjects, and they might feel a little lighter or, you know, a little clearer about some things. Like, you know, and so my question is that if on the OT levels, I'm sorry, take it. If you take what I just said, combined with your statement earlier that Hubbard was kind of an expert at repackaging what other people had done and putting it in something that could be easily sold and delivered, how do you apply that concept to the OT levels? Do you feel that the concept of body thetans is also a repackaging of other work? And if so, what other work?
I would say it's generally just a repackaging of examine shit that you have done or that you're carrying around, stuff that you don't take responsibility for, and just open up to the fact that you are responsible for that part of your beingness that you've locked down and said, that's not me. I mean, there's a multitude of processing in psychology and other philosophies that goes down to you should take responsibility for the shit that you don't take responsibility for, and then own up to it and let it become part of you again. So I think, you know, that this sci-fi thing of making a body Satan act out of it is, yeah, it's kind of 60s, 70s coolish, so that you would hook somebody on it. But if you just try to sell, what we do here on these levels, which are, by the way, not confidential anymore, it's just you looking at shit that you have not taken responsibility for, and then starting to take responsibility for that. That's a very hard sell.
That's true.
It's like,
but okay, but let me jump in here though. Let me jump in here.
Just one thing. If you take that person that just drove over this 4-year-old girl and said, "Well, we're just gonna sit you down in a chair and make you take responsibility for that shit that you done," he's not gonna show up. So
that's true.
Yeah.
But here's my follow-up question to that. Your description of how of what you now think you're really accomplishing on the OT levels, I think is a great way of looking at it. But at the same time, it's also not what Hubbard says you're doing on the OT levels. So your description of it is, in a sense, the best possible interpretation of what one could be accomplishing or should be accomplishing on the OT levels, as far as just taking responsibility for shit you've disowned. But at the same time, that's not what Hubbard says you're doing on the OT levels. It's almost the reverse. He is saying that your body thetans that are not actually you are the cause of all these things, or these incidents that you're recalling on your earlier bridge when you've run all these whole pre-past life incidents. My understanding is that even on OT8, you come to recognize that the vast majority of those incidents were actually incidents that belong to your body thetans, not you. So how do you reconcile the fact that well, you just said that the OT levels could be a repackaging of just this concept of basically taking responsibility for the shit you've disowned, but that's not what Hubbard is expecting you to do on the OT levels. That's almost the way you could turn the OT levels into something beneficial. Do you feel like I'm getting it wrong or describing it wrong? Like, no, Hubbard is not asking you to take responsibility for anything on the OT levels, to my understanding.
And this is part of why I think LRH went nuts, and this is why I think a lot of OT people on the OT levels have gone totally nutty, or overboard and depressive, or there's a lot of shit happening on people on the OT levels that you're not allowed to talk about when you're in the church. You're not allowed to get into it. You should always put a happy face on, etc. Behind that, there is a lot of people going partly batshit, and the reason is they are not taking responsibility for the shit that they should take responsibility for. They are disowning it with authority by LRH, with license by LRH, because it's the body thetans that did it. Now, this is so completely wrong, and I think the reason why I got gains out of it is because I let that happen to me to take responsibility for the shit that I disowned. So, and that's the only way I can explain why I got gains out of it, because it wouldn't make any sense that I would get gains out of disowning shit. That for me is like, I can't make heads or tails of that one. So the only thing I can make heads or tails out of is that I got gains. That's a fact, And how did I get those gains? Well, I'm more responsible now than I was before. So I had to deconstruct what happened to me, and this is what happened. I took more responsibility.
Right. Interesting. So somebody could easily misunderstand the statement that you're saying, which is, I got gains from the OT levels without question. Somebody could misunderstand that statement to mean, therefore, other people should also do the OT levels to get the same gains that I have. Do you feel that your statement leads to that conclusion?
Not at all. I think that's very dicey. You have to have a certain set of mind. You have to have it be in a different place. I think it was actually worse the closest you got to flag, or if you're in the US, you got more pressure. There would be more indoctrination. I think I was freaking lucky to be out on the outskirts of nowhere, meaning Norway, because there is no RTC, there's nothing like that. And then we were more free to do stuff in our own way. So that sort of helped me not get that indoctrinated when I got onto the levels later. So yeah, it was sort of the hippie part of Scientology in Norway that helped me not get that heavily indoctrinated, I would say.
Okay, great. Well, I think these answers are fascinating, and this is really getting down to the nuts and bolts of where I wanted to get to. That it's so easy to misunderstand someone's statement. That if you say this, you must also mean X, Y, and Z, and that is so rarely fucking true. It is
Yeah.
so lazy. Okay, this gets us to
I,
our next.
I had another example of that. Latest, there has always been this discussion: is Scientology a cult or a religion? And people that says it's a religion means it's not a cult, and people that think it's a cult, it means it's not a religion. And that is such a stupid statement, because this is not, in programming parlance, it's not an XOR. It's not mutually exclusive. Something can be not a cult and not a religion. A potato. It's not a cult, it's not a religion. And something could be a cult and a religion. Christian cults are religious cults. And you can have something which is a cult but not a religion. The fan club of Liverpool Football Club is a cult but not a religion. And you can have something that is a religion and not a cult. Certain Buddhist religions are not cults. So these are not mutually exclusive. You can have all these 4 different ways of looking at it. And I happen to think that Scientology is a cultish religion. It's a cult and it's a religion. And to me, being a religion is not a stamp of approval. It's something that I think is perhaps, I'm leaning towards John Lennon on this one. Meaning that I think the world would be a better place without religions. Not meaning that it would be better without spirituality. That's not what I'm saying. So that X does not mean Y. So, but I see, or any organized religion, I would easily chuck that out the window, and it would be a better place. That's my viewpoint on that.
Right. Yes, I agree with you that Scientology is both a cult and a religion. The problem is that what I mean when I say Scientology is a religion is not what most people think I mean when they hear me say that, right? It goes, oh, you're saying Scientology is a religion, therefore you must also be saying X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, no, no. It's not that religion is a good word and cult is a bad word. There's not it's not necessarily a positive or negative connotation to either one of those words. Someone will go, oh, if you say Scientology is a religion, therefore you must be saying it does good in the world. No, that's not what I'm fucking saying. Oh, therefore you must be saying it's worthy of tax exemption. No, that's not what I'm fucking saying. Therefore you must say it has some fundamental truth. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. You know, and so let me ask you, I'll put it back on you since I'm interviewing you. In what ways is Scientology a cult?
Scientology is a cult because it has a leader that is totally in command and in control of the congregation, and that was LRH, and it became David Miscavige. So in any case, it's a cult. It is a thought control system where you're not allowed to think certain things or say certain things. So it's a very closed society, and it's an us and them situation. It's us in Scientology against them, the psychiatrist, or them, the media, or them, somebody else. So there is a cultish mentality there. There is uniform thought. There is thought police. There is 1984 by George Orwell type of situation, which is very cultish. So in that aspect, it's a cult. When I say it's also a religion, I'm comparing it to science. I'm putting an axis there where I say science on one side is completely moldable. Things change all the time, and it's not in somebody's control at all. And there is no belief. There is facts coming up, and we'll believe whatever comes up. Like Dalai Lama, he was once confronted with, if science disproves stuff that you believe in Buddhism, what would you do? And he answered, well, I would have to change my beliefs then. It's very simple. Now, if you look at religion as such, there is sacred text, there is beliefs, there is stuff that is not being in the realms of being disprovable. And LRH is putting together a religion which is so religious that it shames Christianity, because there is not one dot nor one comma that is to be changed in his text. It's more dogmatic than Christianity or Buddhism or Islam put together. So there is no changing, whereas science is completely changing all the time based on facts. So Scientology is put in stone, set in stone, whereas science is always evolving.
Right.
And keeping Scientology working by LRH is what makes it religious.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. In what ways is Scientology a religion?
It is a religion because, as I said, it's based on beliefs. It's based on some axioms that some person wrote down. It's based on also the fact that it's spiritual and all of that. So it's comparable to Buddhism. If you view Buddhism as a religion, then Scientology per se is also a religion with the same ideas. In Buddhism, certain parts of Buddhism, you don't have a God. So God is not a prerequisite to be a religion at all. So there is spiritual side, and everything that Scientology tries to portray itself as a religion, I believe that is true. I don't think that is good, though. I don't think religion is good. But I agree with Scientology when it says itself it's a religion.
Right. So what if someone says, but Scientology is a fraud created by a con man? How can that be a religion?
Well, you have lots of religions back through the ages, which is a con created by some idiot. I mean, you have the Mormons, you have all kind. Yeah, come on, it's like, yeah, and that should set it apart from what? No.
Wait, all right. Now, I think what people run up against here is people who were raised by well-meaning members of Judaism and Christianity have a set idea of what it means to be a religion. And I think they take it as an insult and an affront that anything like Scientology, that seems to have no positive benefit to society at large, could be put into the same category as their own beliefs. And I think that is what people hit up against is, how dare you try to describe this thing with the same word you used to describe my thing? And I think that's missing the point. If you don't mind, I'll jump in with my one key thing that I think makes Scientology a religion. Now, and again, I have to clarify this. I don't mean a respected member of the world religions. I don't mean worthy of tax exemption. I don't mean something that helps society at large. And again, this comes down to, how do you define the word? The fact that Scientology and Scientologists believe that we are fundamentally eternal, immortal, spiritual beings, for me, and I could be wrong on how I'm thinking about this, for me, is what makes Scientology, at least in the conversation of religious, that is a sincerely and closely held belief in Scientology. That is not part of the con. I can't intelligently engage in a debate over what L. Ron Hubbard himself truly believed or didn't believe, because fuck, we can argue about that all day long. Whether what he believed and when he believed it, right? Like, if LRH, did he buy his bullshit in the beginning, or did it start out as a sales technique that he then went crazy and believed in? Not part of this conversation. Scientologists do truly believe that we are all immortal spiritual beings, and the process of auditing in the eyes of a Scientologist is directly geared towards addressing your problems, trials, and tribulations from the viewpoint of being a spiritual being. And they believe that. Regardless of whether Hubbard believed it or not, it almost doesn't matter. Give it another couple hundred years, it doesn't fucking matter what the person who created this subject truly believed. What matters is that the members believe it. And
yeah,
it's
that goes for Christianity as well. We don't know what Jesus Christ believed or didn't believe, really, or Muhammad. or any of those guys, because they're not here to be questioned about their beliefs. So what we have is somebody who wrote down what they think they believed or what they think they said, etc. So it's the same thing. But we do believe that Christianity and Islam, etc., are religions, just because they are acting religious now, and their beliefs are sacred to them, just as Scientologists are doing the same.
Sure. So let me ask you a question here. Do you see, do you feel, do you believe that like the Christian religion or the religion of Islam or Judaism have a net positive effect on society at large in a way that Scientology does not? Like, are there differences between these things in your eyes?
I think there is a gradual differences in how much damage it does to society at large.
Right.
Christianity does a little bit of damage to society at large. Islam does a bit of damage to the society at large. Scientology does a bit of damage to society at large. Now, the reason why Scientology does less damage is because it's less spread out. It's just, 20, 30,000 members, so it couldn't do that much damage. But I believe if Scientology in its present form was as big as Islam, it would have a greater detrimental effect on society than Islam has today.
I certainly would have to
But I
agree with you
think
there.
all these religions have a detrimental effect on society just because they stand in opposition to facts.
Right.
Facts
Here's
should
one
rule.
here's one distinction that I've made, and I'm curious to get your opinion on this. Even though I did just make the statement a little bit ago that I believe Scientology fits under the umbrella of what the word religion means, there is a distinct difference in how Scientology conducts itself, and how and its justifications for doing so, and how something like, let's just say, the Catholic Church conducts itself and its justifications for doing so. And here's what I mean. So in the Catholic Church, you had a huge problem with priests molesting kids. But what you didn't have was the Pope coming out and saying it was their First Amendment right to molest kids. Whereas in Scientology, you have a particular policies and practices that are extremely destructive, including the fair game practices. And instead of coming out, instead of Miscavige or whoever coming out and saying, you know what, we've made a lot of mistakes in the past. We've decided this is not who we are, and we're going to change moving forward. Instead of doing something like that, they come out and say, this is our First Amendment right to practice our religion this way. They're trying to endorse the abuse. They're trying to that they haven't repudiated the abusive practices. And I don't mean to imply that the Catholic Church is not committing any abuses now, but the Pope certainly didn't come out and say it is our religious right to abuse kids. That behavior was eventually repudiated. And whether they did enough to make up for the damage is not part of this conversation. That's a distinction that I've made for myself. Even though I'm using the word religion to describe both of these bodies of knowledge or whatever, there is still a difference in how Scientology conducts itself compared to the other world religions. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm saying just this. There is a lot of history or ground that Christianity and Islam has covered. They have been here around for 2,000, 1,500 years. And give Scientology another 1,000 years, and I would say this child diseases that Scientology is experiencing right now is saying it's our First Amendment right to be able to, do our religion the way we see fit, and do all kinds of suppression against people, the same as Christianity did back then.
Right.
Because they did. They said it's our religious right to torture people. It's our religious right to burn witches. And that's far, far worse than Scientology has ever been able to do.
Yeah.
So Christianity comes from a Scientology galore back in the heydays of Christianity, and the same with Islam. Almost all religions have this, it's our God-given right to rape you, to torture you, to take your land, to do whatever. And it's a Christian right to take the Native and Indians and Native Americans land just because. Scientology is a baby religion, and it's far less harmful than Christianity and Islam has been. Far less as a whole. And all this drama you find infighting and shit about Scientology, it's way too much drama for me. I pulled out of every Scientology Facebook group, every social media thingy that has to do with Scientology, because I think people are generally nuts in there. It's so much drama, and it's so much, oh, this is so horrible. Fucking, it's not. It's not horrible. It's like disconnection. Give me a fucking break. I mean, people are dying around. People are getting blown up by bombs here and there. And we go, oh, it's so horrible that this person was disconnected from. I guess it's horrible for that person, but looking at it from an objective point of view, it's nothing compared to the shit going on in this world. And I think people are pussycats and snowflakes and whatnot because they are dramatizing all this shit, to be quite honest.
No, I hear what you're saying. Now, of course, what someone spends their time talking about and what they get outraged about is a reflection of their own personal experience and the path that they've walked. It's one thing to see the death and destruction occurring in the world on the news and online, but if that's not what you're living on a day-to-day basis, I don't know. It could be a stretch to expect somebody to put their day-to-day personal experiences into context with, you know, the death and destruction occurring elsewhere in the world. I mean, when you say,
I mean, that's true enough, but at some point you got to get fucking over it. I mean, if you continue like that for 20 years, there is, I mean, I've written a one-page book on that too, which is called "And?" ? And there is something to that. It's oh, I got raped by 25 grannies when I was 16. Somebody says, and I said, okay, and are you going to carry that around, or are you going to do something about it? Either you do something about it, or you just let it go. At one point, you have to let it go. Otherwise, you're killing yourself with it.
Let me ask you this. For me personally, if you were to look at the interviews and the videos that I've done on my channel, I don't do very much complaining about my personal experience in Scientology. Because similar to you, I feel like by luck, by hook or by crook, I dodged so many bullets and managed to, in some ways, navigate through to, in some ways, only kind of take the best parts of my experience with me. That it's hard for me to look back on my time in Scientology and do a lot of complaining. I can do a lot of observation. There are certainly some experiences that to me were normal that to society at large are sure as fuck not normal. But I turned out pretty well. And it's very hard for me to look back on that and be ultra critical. I think in one of my videos I said I tend to look back on it all with somewhat rose-colored glasses or through rose-colored lens, because life has turned out quite well for me. So how critical can I be of the path that I took to get here, right? And my channel is somewhat dedicated to having an honest conversation about Scientology in the manner of like full disclosure. Like, I want this to be a place where people can talk honestly about their positive and negative experiences in Scientology, and that if someone in Scientology stumbles upon our channel, that my channel, that the conversations will be fair enough and honest enough that someone would not be offended or repulsed by it, and they might actually be pulled into the conversation. Like, oh, other people had similar doubts to me. Or, oh, look, these are people having a critical conversation about Scientology, but they're also being intellectually honest enough to acknowledge that it wasn't all bad. So my channel's been dedicated to the conversation itself and not the conclusion. And one of the things that I have said is that, and this is what I want to get your opinion on. You know, people are free to disconnect from people over in life for 100 different reasons. The fact that Scientologists disconnect from people because Scientology tells them to is just one reason in the world at large why family members stop talking to each other. Here's where I take offense to Scientology's practice of disconnection. It's one thing for people to honestly make a self-determined decision to discard friends or family members. I mean, that's someone's right to do so. It's another thing when a cult like Scientology has conditioned someone to the point through lies of believing that this thing is more important than their friends and family. And if someone comes along and says, well, that's fine, you're offended because that was your experience, but the truth is this happens to people all over the world all the time, I'd go, fair point. But I'm not involved in all those other things. I was involved in this thing. And if someone's in Scientology and they're being pressured to disconnect from their friends and their family, particularly their family, I feel like it is humane that if someone is being pressured to make that decision, they should at the same time be free to fully understand what this thing is that they're being told is more important than their family. And I think one of the other distinctions that come into play here between Scientology and the other world's major religions is you know what the other religions fucking believe. If you're a lower level Scientologist and you're being sold this concept of full OT, you have no fucking idea that no one has ever achieved this level of this state of full OT. L. Ron Hubbard never achieved it. There are no more OT levels, which is how I always explained away the fact that there were no OTs that I could see. You know, I explained it away. There's still 10 or whatever more OT levels. That's where the real good stuff comes. If someone's going to pressure you to throw away your family, you should motherfucking be able to know the true nature of what it is you're actually involved in. And even having said that, I still don't really get embroiled in the outrage machine. I don't. And I think that's one of the things that has caused a small fringe of people I have no respect for to paint me as a Scientology apologist. And I go, no, there's a nuanced conversation to be had here. I don't really get involved in the outrage machine. I'm pretty dedicated to, but there's a place for an honest conversation here. And if Scientology would treat people just a little bit better, and if they would stop forcing people to choose between what they're being told is their eternal spiritual freedom and their family, I would probably have a lot less to say on this subject. Do you know what I'm saying? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think disconnection, how it's practiced in Scientology, is just stupid from many points of view. Also from Scientology's point of view, because if Scientology didn't do that, they wouldn't get all this flack. So it's a foot bullet. The whole thing is just stupid, and it will come back and bite every person that disconnects in any way. So if from a personal level it's stupid, on an organizational level it's stupid, on a societal level it's stupid. It's just fucking stupid. So, but also I don't engage in any, complaint machinery or outrage or whatever. I've just completely disconnected from Scientology. That's my view. I don't care about Scientology. The only reason I said yes to come on your podcast is because you seem to be a cool guy. So, and it's about, I do one lecture per year on Scientology. And that is one person on the theological faculty in the University of Oslo. She's so nice that I just can't say no to her. So I do 2 hours every year just because she's nice. And then I say, is one prerequisite, you have to tape it and you have to put it on YouTube so I don't have to do the same thing again. So I do it differently every time, just so that people get more YouTube videos that they can see. And the reason for that is that every now and then people come to me and say, I'm doing this thesis on Scientology, could you help me? And then I say, see these videos, and then come back with questions. Nobody does, because the videos apparently answers every one of them. So I have totally disconnected from the whole shit show, from the drama, from everything. But I have this opinion on disconnection that it is stupid. The fact that people or Scientology enforces disconnection is the problem. That people are individually disconnected for somebody they think is a shitbag. Sure, you can do that, no problem. But if it's an organizational concept and enforced, then it's a problem.
Yes. So you do agree that this enforced disconnection thing, well, is stupid and bad. But at the same time, are you saying it's not bad enough to keep talking about?
It's bad enough to keep talking about for the people involved in it. And I would, I would applaud any person's. I outreach to people who need the help, or any person that needs the help to do his outcry of this to get his children back. Obviously, I would do the same. But I think there is enough people who are outraged about that, and enough people doing their stuff to handle this with Leah and Mike and all these other people, that I think I don't have a place to play or a part to play in that. It's fine.
When you left or the Church of Scientology, was there any period where you were involved in independent Scientology, or did you make a clean break on that because you were already OT8 or any other reason?
No, I was involved in independent Scientology, sort of. I did actually L11 after I left Scientology. So,
Okay.
which was also beneficial. I'm sure if I did the old OT levels, I would get benefits. I'm sure if I sat down and meditated on strawberry for 5 days, I would get benefits from that. I'm just, I don't know why, but that's how it is. I enjoy
No, I get.
stuff I do in life. I don't do things I don't enjoy. And because I do things I enjoy, I get benefits from it. It's very unmagical, really.
Sure. So I'm curious, before you made the decision to kind of like, you know, pull the eject button and just get the fuck out of the entire thing, who did you find were fighting you or objecting to you? And I don't mean names of people. What were people objecting to? Were they saying you're too pro Scientology, you're too pro LRH, you're too pro auditing, you're too anti this? Where were you being fought from?
Both sides. Yeah, both sides. And there actually are two sides, as you have noticed, obviously. And there is the pro and there is the con, and there is nothing in between. There is you that is in between, and there are some other people in between, but there are far and few between. So, but the thing is, I was fought by Scientologists saying, "Oh, you're a heretic. You are a failed OT. You're not really OT. You just got your way through. You're an SP, and you just took on you did the levels falsely. I don't know what." And then you have the other guy saying, "Oh, you think you got gains out of Scientology, therefore you're pro Scientology, and everything you say should be painted in that light." And I mean, it's
pretty exhausting.
Yeah, it's just stupid. It's intellectually dishonest on both sides, and I've written a lot about this. And you see, my earliest blog post goes into this, the pros and cons. And I wrote an open letter to Scientology critics, an open letter to Scientologists, an open letter to independent Scientologists, going through the middle ground and seeing that there is, as you say, there should be a place for an honest intellectual discussion regarding Scientology, and not all this emotional rah-rah that we see all the time.
So let me ask you this question. The Scientology in the Aftermath show, do you feel this show is contributing in a positive way to the current conversation about Scientology? And as you mentioned before, that I think you said that if Scientology were as large as Christianity or Islam or Judaism, it would be having a more negative effect on society than either of those other religions.
Yes.
Do you feel the show is doing a good job contributing to the conversation of how that would be true?
I have to just admit that I'm so far away from Scientology, I haven't seen one single show.
I'm sorry, we're gonna have to end this interview right now.
I haven't seen one single episode.
Okay, I withdraw the question.
Yeah, I couldn't answer.
Geir, you're breaking my heart.
Yeah, probably a lot of other people's heart as well. But I couldn't give a shit. I have an old HP calculator I need to program. I don't have time for that.
Oh, that's so funny. Okay, good. Hey, look, you mentioned before, actually, so you have a blog. I have to admit, I didn't know your blog existed until this week, and I just saw your first entry, and I immediately, not your first, your most recent entry, and I immediately messaged you and say, "Hey, can we do an interview?" Yeah. I haven't read any of the other things on here, but so this is not a blog dedicated to the subject of Scientology. This is just your blog as an individual, and it happens to have some posts on here relating to Scientology.
Yeah, it was a lot of posts related to Scientology in the beginning, and then it became less and less and less frequent. And now there is hardly any non-Scientology there. And there's a lot of other stuff. All my one-page books are there, tips on coaching, some stuff on Donald Trump. I mean, lots of stuff. Yeah, and techie stuff as well. Yeah.
Okay. Now you mentioned coaching. So, and you mentioned that there's still some things from Scientology that you use in your coaching. What are some examples of what you're talking about there?
TRs.
Okay.
My own butcher type of TRs, really. I amend them. I change them to fit the coaching subject. I mean, it has had great results on the stuff I've used, taken out from the communication course, the TRs.
Sure.
We have some gold medals in the Olympics and World Championships, etc., based on that type of drilling. Yes.
Interesting. And this gets into a subject where sometimes I tread lightly because of how easy it makes it for some people to paint me as some sort of a fucking apologist. And just for the record, I've never even dabbled in independent Scientology. I didn't even like getting auditing when I was fucking in Scientology. I've never gone within 100 miles of it since leaving the Sea Org or being declared or anything. And yet at the same time, it does not bother me in the least to know that other people are doing it, to know that other people are doing it, to know other people who are doing it. Doesn't bother me in the least. Kind of like what you said. People can do whatever they feel makes them feel better in any way. It's no skin off my back. So let me see, where was I going with this? It's easy to say, and a lot of people do say, that everything in Scientology that is helpful in any regard was simply stolen from some or borrowed from some other subject and repackaged. I can understand why people say that. But then it comes to the TRs. And I go, well, who did Hubbard take the TRs from? I'm not aware of, and I don't care whether he did or didn't. It's just a question. Who did he take the TRs from? And then let's just say that he did repackage the TRs from someone else. If we acknowledge that TRs can be helpful and they were borrowed from somewhere else, then we can't at the same time criticize people for continuing to use the TRs in other fields if we're saying Hubbard didn't even really create them. I'm kind of just doing a monologue here, because I know there are people who will hear you say that you still use TRs in other places and say, fucking closet Scientologist. And I go, but wait a second. I thought we had already said that anything that was helpful in Scientology was stolen from someone else anyway. So how does continuing to use them make someone a closet Scientologist?
There is a matter of intellectual dishonesty here. Some people say, okay, so the conclusion must be that Scientology is bad. Therefore, I construct all these arguments to that effect. This is what happens. And the same thing happens with Scientologists inside Scientology. Scientology is ultimately the best thing that could ever happen in the universe. Therefore, I construct all my arguments to fit that conclusion. That is the intellectual dishonesty. That's what happens. So we need Scientology to be bad, totally black, completely evil, nothing good in it. Therefore, we need to paint everything that has to do with Scientology bad. So we paint it bad two ways. We say the TRs are bad. They're bad for you. They're hypnotic. They could change your mind. They could fuck you up totally. And also bad because Hubbard didn't even create it. So now make up your mind. Is it bad or is it not bad? Is it him or is it not him? As you point out, it's an inconsistency. But that is what happens when you probe and go into intellectual dishonest arguments. You find inconsistencies, and this is one of them.
Right.
I'm getting to the point where the sun is setting, so it looks like I'm getting really dark here. And secondly, I can hear my sons calling for me outside.
Yeah,
somebody
no problem at all.
To do something else here.
No problem at all. Well, I'll tell you what, depending on the questions and comments we get on this video, and depending on some other things, would you open for maybe doing a follow-up?
Yeah, sure. You're definitely a cool guy, so I will do any podcast with you. No problem.
Awesome. All right, everyone, thank you for watching. Post your questions and comments below, and that's all we got. We'll talk to you guys later. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.